They say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but they never talk about the wheel that doesn't squeak, because that one gets forgotten until it rusts away in silence. I was 10 years old when I realized that being dependable meant becoming invisible, and that being the child who didn't cause problems meant you were the one nobody really looked at. It started with a school play, of all things, a moment that should have been trivial in the grand scheme of a young life, but one that etched itself into the walls of my chest so deeply that even now, years later, I can feel the scar tissue tightening whenever I breathe too deeply. I had practiced for weeks in my room, whispering my lines in the dark after everyone had gone to bed, curling under the covers with a flashlight and a frayed script, mouthing my scenes like prayers. I was just a tree. Not the lead, not even a speaking role with meaning. But I loved it. I wanted it. I had painted cardboard leaves with my own hands and glued them onto a shirt I found at a yard sale, because the school couldn't afford costumes, and my parents said they couldn't either. Still, I was proud of that ridiculous shirt. I was proud of the glitter I smuggled from art class and sprinkled across my sleeves. It was the first thing in my short life I had worked for, just for me. But the day of the performance, the call came in just before we were supposed to leave. Liam had thrown a chair at his teacher again. 2nd grade. Another meltdown. Another emergency. I remember the phone's shrill ring slicing through the house like a blade. I was halfway out the door, backpack swinging behind me, program clutched in my hand. Mom answered, and I heard the tone shift, first panic, then frustration, then exasperation tangled in weary acceptance. I didn't even need to hear the words. I already knew. Dad was in the garage. He'd been arguing with the lawnmower again, trying to get it to start with the same stubborn will he used on the rest of the world. Mom poked her head outside and told him to grab his keys. I opened my mouth to remind them, gently, always gently, that the play was in an hour. I didn't want to beg. I didn't want to cry. I just wanted them to remember. To see me. But the moment passed like so many others had before it, without anyone truly noticing it was even there. Dad muttered something about figures, and Mom tossed her purse over her shoulder with a sigh. "You'll have to stay here and keep dinner going," she said. "We'll be back as soon as we can." And that was that. They were gone before I could argue. I stood in the kitchen, cardboard leaves rustling faintly with every movement, staring at the casserole in the oven like it might explain something to me that my parents never had. The play went on without me. I imagine another kid stepped in. Maybe they didn't even need a tree. Maybe no one noticed at all. That was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be the easy one. They called it a blessing. A gift. Brianna never causes trouble. Brianna can handle herself. Thank God we don't have to worry about her. I thought it was love. I thought it was respect. But looking back now, I know it wasn't either. It was convenience. I wasn't seen. I was used. And the worst part? I thought it was normal. I thought that's what love looked like, being quiet, being useful, and above all, not needing anything in return. Liam was 5 when they started calling him sensitive, a word they used like armor, like a way to excuse every explosion, every tantrum, every cruel, flung insult. He had a sweetness in him, sure, when he wasn't raging, he could be magnetic, clever, even funny. But it came with chaos. It came with fire. And my parents? They bowed before that fire like worshippers before a god, desperate to keep it from burning the house down. There were therapists and suspensions and tearful parent-teacher conferences. There were school meetings where my mom cried and said, "We're doing our best," and teachers who offered tired, sympathetic looks that said they'd heard it all before. In the background, there was me, folding laundry, heating leftovers, remembering birthdays, and doing my homework without anyone reminding me to. By the time I was 12, I had memorized Liam's meltdowns better than my own heartbeat. I could predict them by the way he walked into the room, by the way his eyes darted or his lip curled. I learned to intercept disaster before it detonated. I learned to disappear at the right moments, to redirect conversations, to carry tension like a second skin. Once, when he broke a window during a fight with Dad, I swept up the glass before anyone noticed, wrapped it in newspaper, and took the blame. I said I'd tripped. Nobody asked questions. They never did. Why would they? I was Brianna. I remember printing the acceptance letter and placing it on the kitchen counter, weighted with a ceramic apple so the breeze wouldn't carry it away. I waited all day for someone to notice. To say something. To see me. But Liam had gotten suspended again. This time for shoving a classmate down the stairs. The other kid wasn't badly hurt, thank God, but the drama was enough to suck all the air out of the house. Mom was on the phone for hours with the school counselor, and Dad stood in the hallway muttering about boys being boys while chain-smoking Marlboros like his lungs had wronged him personally. I didn't mention the letter. I just tucked it into a drawer after dinner while everyone argued in the living room. I read it again under the covers that night, over and over, like a secret love note sent to someone I wasn't allowed to be. I should have been happy. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt empty. There was no big breakdown. No explosive moment where I screamed that I was hurting or stormed out in tears. That wasn't how I worked. I had been trained, conditioned, to keep things smooth. To maintain the illusion. But something cracked the night of my graduation. The ceremony was long, dull in the way most high school graduations are, but I wore my cap like a crown and told myself it mattered. I had pushed so hard to get there. I had earned it. My future was a rocket waiting to launch, and I stood on the launch pad with trembling knees and stars in my eyes. When they called my name, I walked across the stage with my chin high and my smile tight. I scanned the crowd for my parents, for Liam. I spotted them near the back, Dad with his arms crossed, Mom clutching her purse like it might fly away. Liam was on his phone. They clapped. Briefly. That was it. No hug after. No we're so proud. No dinner out or balloons or pictures in the driveway. Just silence on the drive home, broken only by Liam complaining that the ceremony was boring and asking if we could stop for burgers. We didn't. That night, I lay in bed in my childhood room and stared at the ceiling like it was the edge of the universe. I could hear Liam downstairs, yelling at his Xbox. I could hear Dad's low grumble as he turned off the lights. I could hear everything, except what I needed most. I could hear them not caring. And that's when I knew. Not suspected. Not feared. Knew. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't even a thought. I was the glue. I was the background. I was the steady hand keeping everything afloat, and they had mistaken my silence for strength, my obedience for resilience, my pain for non-existence. You want to know the cost of being dependable? Let me spell it out. The cost is never being asked how you're really doing. The cost is people forgetting your birthday and calling it an accident every year. The cost is carrying other people's messes while your own go unseen and unacknowledged. The cost is standing in the shadows clapping while others take center stage for simply not falling apart. The cost is that one day you wake up and realize no one ever really knew you at all. Not your parents. Not your brother. Not even yourself. I thought I was okay with that. For a long time, I told myself it was enough. Until it wasn't. Until something happened that finally pushed me past the edges I didn't even know I had. And that's where this story really begins. Because being the shadow child isn't a permanent role. Eventually, even shadows want to stand in the light. I never believed in epiphanies. Not the kind that struck like lightning and made everything suddenly clear, neatly reframed, and conveniently illuminated. The truth was, I believed in slow erosion, the kind that wears you down, inch by imperceptible inch, until one day your foundation cracks under the weight of everything you were too polite to scream. That's how it happened to me. There wasn't a single explosion, no violent, cinematic climax where the music swells and the heroine finds her voice. Instead, it was the sound of something much quieter. Something much more final. It was the sound of my own footsteps walking away from a dinner table set for people who never intended to show up. At 29, I had finally done the thing I'd spent my entire life working toward. I had clawed my way up the rickety, uneven ladder of a notoriously brutal marketing firm, outpacing men who talked over me and women who side-eyed my ambition with practiced malice. I had absorbed the deadlines, the sleep deprivation, the humiliations in glass-walled meeting rooms where the air conditioning was always too cold and the expectations were colder still. I had said yes when I wanted to say no. I had stayed late, smiled through clenched teeth, and watched others take credit for my work until I became too essential to ignore. And then, finally, the call came in. Senior Director of Brand Strategy, my boss said, a rare softness in his voice, like he knew this was more than a title to me. "You've earned it, Brianna. You've more than earned it." I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there in the silence of my office, fingers trembling over the phone, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling window like I could see every missed birthday, every overlooked award, every forgotten milestone stacked like ghosts across the skyline. That promotion wasn't just a raise. It was a vindication. A neon sign that blazed "I matter" in letters too bright to ignore. I wanted to share it. God, I wanted to share it. So, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I reached out to my family. The dinner was my idea. Small, intimate, just me and them. No noise. No crowd. Just a chance to breathe in the glow of my own accomplishment for once, instead of shrinking into the background like wallpaper. I bought a bottle of wine I couldn't afford 10 years ago, the kind I used to stare at longingly in supermarket aisles before grabbing the boxed stuff on sale. I ordered food from that place near the river, the one Mom liked but always said was too fancy for no reason. I cleaned the apartment. I set the table. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel hope. Maybe they'd changed. Maybe they'd see me now. Maybe the girl who held their world together in silence could finally be invited to her own celebration. I wore navy. Not black, too safe. Not red, too loud. Navy was poised. Strong. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I should have been proud of. And then my phone lit up. "Mom, sorry, sweetie. We're throwing Liam a party, he got that radio station job. You understand, right? So proud of you too." There was a string of emojis. A balloon. A heart. A thumbs up. No call. No voice. Just a text message. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. But I did. I understood that once again, Liam had eclipsed me. Again, without even trying. Again, by simply existing. He got a job at a local station, midnight shift, probably unpaid, probably temporary, but he was doing something, and that was enough for a parade. Meanwhile, I had dragged myself out of the pit of invisible daughterhood into a title people fought to earn, and I got a goddamn text. "Sorry, sweetie." They always called me that when they were letting me down. Sweetie, as if it softened the blade they were driving just beneath the ribs. Sweetie, as if affection could replace acknowledgement. I stared at the phone for a long time. The wine was sweating on the counter, the condensation puddling like tears I refused to shed. The food was getting cold. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I didn't even text back. I walked to the table and carefully removed the extra place settings. I folded the napkins. I poured a glass of wine, not a celebratory toast, but a funeral drink. Then I found a notepad, the kind Mom used to scribble grocery lists on, and I wrote exactly 9 words. "Since Liam's the priority, he can take care of things now." I left it on the counter. And then I disappeared. There's a myth about the dependable one. That if they walk away, everything falls apart. That they're the spine of the family, the unbreakable bridge. But here's the truth, we're not bridges. We're people. And bridges collapse too, eventually, under enough weight and without enough maintenance. That night, I drove without direction. I didn't have a plan. I just left. My phone vibrated a few times. I didn't check it. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want anything. I parked near the lake on the edge of town. The same lake where Liam once got lost for 4 hours and the entire neighborhood came out to search for him. The lake where I used to read while waiting for someone to pick me up, long after everyone else had gone home. The moon shimmered across the water, soft and quiet. I sat on the hood of my car, shoes off, legs crossed, staring at the water like it owed me answers. And that's when it happened. The breakdown I never allowed myself. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. No sobbing into the void. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that follows realization. I wasn't angry. Not really. I was done. Done hoping. Done earning. Done shrinking. Done being the goddamn tree in the background of someone else's show. They didn't call until morning. Not once during the night. Not to check where I was. Not to make sure I was okay. When the sun rose and I finally looked at my phone, there were 3 messages. Mom, did you leave that note for real? Dad, you could have at least said something before leaving like that. Liam, nice tantrum. Grow up. No, are you safe? No, we're sorry. No, congratulations. You want to know what betrayal looks like? It looks like your own family thinking your pain is an inconvenience. It looks like them treating your absence like a bigger problem than your existence ever was. It looks like being replaced by someone who never once earned the seat they were given at the table. For so long, I'd told myself it wasn't betrayal. That it was ignorance. That they just didn't know. But ignorance doesn't send texts like that. Ignorance doesn't minimize your pain the second it becomes visible. Ignorance doesn't twist the knife and call it family. That morning, I didn't go home. I went to the office. I sat at my new desk, surrounded by flowers from coworkers and emails of congratulations from executives I barely knew, and I stared out the window for a long time. People passed by, offering compliments, asking about dinner, about celebration plans. I smiled and said it was low-key. I didn't mention the empty table. I didn't mention the note. I didn't mention the hollow silence still ringing in my ears. But when I looked in the mirror that afternoon, in the restroom where the light was too harsh and the tile too cold, I saw something I hadn't seen before. I saw a woman who was finally done waiting. Done waiting for recognition. Done waiting for validation. Done waiting to be rescued. Done waiting for people who would never, ever choose her first. I didn't go home that weekend. I booked a room at a quiet inn on the coast, one of those places with no TVs and overpriced tea. I walked barefoot along the beach. I turned off my phone. I took long baths. I listened to music I hadn't heard since I was a teenager, when I still believed I might be someone worth celebrating. I thought I would feel lonely. But I didn't. I felt free. When I finally returned, there was a note under my door. Not from my family, from my neighbor, Nina. A kind woman in her 60s who always watered my plants when I traveled. The note said she'd seen someone stop by, try the door, and leave angry. She described him as tall, loud, annoyed. Liam. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted again. But he had tried to get in. I don't know what he wanted. Maybe an explanation. Maybe to lecture me. Maybe to reclaim the spotlight by turning my moment into another family drama with him as the reluctant star. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I truly didn't care what Liam wanted. A week later, Mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I think we all just misunderstood each other, sweetie. Your brother was really excited. He didn't mean to take the spotlight from you. You've always been our rock. You know that. We're so proud of you. We just didn't realize it was such a big deal. Let's talk soon. No mention of the note. No apology. Just a spin. A rewrite. I deleted the message. not out of anger, but because I knew exactly what it was. An invitation back into the same cycle that had crushed me for 29 years. An attempt to pull me back into the shadows. But I'd already stepped out. And I had no intention of going back. They say silence is golden, but what they never tell you is how loud it becomes once people realize it means you're gone. Not absent. Not away. Gone. Gone in the way that matters. Gone in the way that changes the rules. Gone in the way that makes people realize your presence wasn't just convenient, it was the scaffolding holding up their entire damn building. I woke up late the next morning, wrapped in the soft gray blankets of a rental house I'd booked without even looking at the photos too closely. My body was sore in the way that happens only after emotional exhaustion has finally been allowed to finish its full circuit, like a wildfire burning every last inch of fuel. The light through the window was gentle, not sharp like it was in my apartment. The silence was complete. No footsteps. No Liam slamming cabinet doors. No Dad grumbling about the thermostat. No one needing anything from me. Just me. My breathing. My pulse. And then, like a flood breaking a dam, it started. My phone lit up on the nightstand, screen blinking like a siren, vibrating across the wood in frantic bursts. It didn't stop for minutes. I watched it as if it were a living thing trying to scream through a muzzle, fighting to pull me back into a world I had very intentionally stepped out of. 37 missed calls. 24 voicemails. 15 texts. And one particularly ominous "Where are you?" from Mom, sent at 2:41 a.m., capitalized, frantic, like I had vanished from the face of the earth and taken their control of me. I didn't open any of them right away. I made coffee instead. Real coffee. The kind you grind by hand, with beans that smell like something sacred. I poured it into a chipped white mug and stood barefoot in the little kitchen, watching the steam rise as the sun crept higher through the windows. I had learned to breathe again. I had remembered what peace sounded like. And I wasn't ready to give it up. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Eventually, curiosity overruled defiance. I played the voicemails. One by one. Each a confession, a plea, or a demand wearing the mask of concern. Mom's voice, sharp and rattling, on the edge of hysteria. "Brianna, I don't know what kind of message you're trying to send, but this is not the time. Please, we need you." Dad's message, thick-tongued and slurred, left at nearly midnight. "You know, this is real selfish, kiddo. Real goddamn selfish. Everything's falling apart down here, and you're off doing whatever." A neighbor's number I recognized, voice apologetic and quiet. "Hi, Brianna, sorry to bother you, but your mom asked me to call, there was a small fire. Everything's fine now. Just, maybe check in?" And then came Liam. 4 messages. Each one progressively less composed. The first was short. Blunt. Irritated. "Okay, this is childish. I know you're pissed or whatever, but can you just stop being dramatic and call Mom back?" The second had a crack in the middle. Not anger. Something closer to panic. "Dad got drunk. Like, really drunk. He knocked over the fondue pot or something. The counter caught fire. The kitchen's a wreck. I tried to put it out. I did, but..." The third was at 3:13 a.m., voice tight, breaking. "This was supposed to be my night. You made your point, okay? You didn't have to disappear. You didn't have to ruin everything." The last one was barely above a whisper. A question dragged through teeth that had finally stopped clenching. "What do you want from me?" I didn't answer any of them. I let the silence stretch like a shadow across their chaos. Let them sit in the space I used to fill. Let them finally feel what it was like to need someone, and realize that someone was gone. Around noon, I finally replied to Liam. Not because I owed him a response, but because I wanted him to know exactly what this silence meant. I typed the words slowly, deliberately, my thumb resting on the send button like it was a detonator. You never noticed me when I held everything together. Now you'll see what I was holding. Then I turned the phone off again. Let me explain what happens when the linchpin pulls itself out. The family dinner doesn't just get awkward, it implodes. The stories I pieced together from secondhand sources and snippets told me everything I needed to know. Apparently, without me there to preheat the oven, set the schedule, calm Dad down with a well-timed joke, and preempt Liam's anxiety spiral with silent, practiced maneuvers, the whole evening collapsed like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Dad, nervous about hosting, started drinking early. When Mom asked him to slow down, he shouted that she was always judging him. Liam, feeling the pressure of being the man of the hour, started to unravel under all the attention he wasn't used to handling responsibly. Someone brought up my promotion, finally, and the conversation turned cold. Mom tried to change the subject. Liam apparently snapped, accusing her of always making everything about the one who isn't even here. Then came the fire. Some idiot left a cheese fondue set too close to a pile of napkins. One spark, a scream, and a frantic scramble with the fire extinguisher. No real damage, but enough smoke and panic to end the party on a sour note. And the only person anyone wanted to call was me. Not because they cared how I was, but because they wanted me to clean it up. Because that's who I'd always been, the mop. The fixer. The duct tape they never thanked but always reached for. And this time, I wasn't there. I took a walk down the rocky beach that afternoon, letting the water soak my ankles, letting the salt and wind sting the parts of me that had long been numb. There was no metaphor in it. No cinematic transformation. Just one foot in front of the other. Just the knowledge that I didn't have to go back. Not today. Maybe not ever. The world hadn't ended without me. But theirs had cracked. And I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. By that night, I had a new message from Mom. Just one. No apology. No acknowledgement of the fire. No reference to the note I left. No mention of the fact that I had been gone for 2 full days with no explanation or confirmation of my safety. Just this. Please don't let this family fall apart. The irony hit like a punch in the throat. As if it hadn't already. As if I had been the one breaking it. As if I hadn't spent 3 decades holding it together with bleeding fingers and a smile so fixed it cracked my molars. They had taken my silence as abandonment. But it wasn't. It was self-preservation. And if that looked like betrayal to them, it only proved how little they had ever truly seen me. Because love is not silent when you're suffering. Love doesn't wait for a breakdown before checking if you're breathing. Love doesn't text, "Sorry sweetie," while lighting a candle for the golden child. Love shows up. And they never did. That night, I wrote a list. Not of grievances. Not of their mistakes. But of the things I had done for them that they had never even noticed. The Christmas I used my babysitting money to buy Liam a video game because Mom said they were too broke. The college application I wrote in the car between errands because Dad forgot to pick up the forms. The 10 birthdays I planned for Liam because he always wanted cool themes and no one else cared enough to coordinate them. The panic attacks I talked him through while skipping dates and interviews and sleep. The endless, invisible labor of being dependable, competent, quiet, and useful. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I burned it in the fireplace. Because they didn't deserve a record. They deserved the absence. When I returned to my apartment, it was still clean, still quiet, still mine. There were no missed calls that mattered. Just one envelope in the mailbox. A card from a coworker, congratulating me again. Inside was a small note. They say grace under pressure is a gift. But grace without appreciation is a cage. Fly, Brianna. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't profound. But it was real. It saw me. And I realized, maybe for the first time, that I didn't need my family to recognize me to be real. I had always been real. They were just too blind to see it. You want to know what silence really is? It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's a mirror. And once you hold it up to the people who've relied on your silence for years, they either look away, or they see themselves clearly for the first time and shatter. Let them shatter. Let them feel the weight of the wreckage they created. I did. For years. It wasn't rage that brought me back. It wasn't forgiveness either. I didn't return to patch things up, to offer olive branches, or to seek some fairy tale redemption arc where everyone hugs in the rain and promises to change. I came back because I was owed something, not apologies, not regret, not even remorse. I came for the truth. And the truth wasn't for them. It was for me. A week had passed since the missed dinner, the party turned disaster, and the night I walked away from everything they took for granted. 7 days of uninterrupted silence on my end. 7 days where they had been forced, finally, to sit inside the ruins of their own choices without me to sweep up the broken glass. I pulled into the driveway of the house I once called home on a Saturday afternoon, where the trees looked the same but nothing else did. The siding was chipped. The lawn overgrown. A sagging bike still sat near the porch steps, rusted by time and rain. The house had the look of a place maintained by someone distracted, someone always waiting for the dependable one to come and fix it. I parked. I didn't turn the engine off right away. I sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing in the moment before the strike. This wasn't about healing. This wasn't about closure. This was about truth spoken aloud. Truth that had lived too long in the margins of their lives, inked in the handwriting of silence, in gestures mistaken for compliance and pain mistaken for patience. They needed to hear it. And I needed to say it when I opened the door and stepped into the living room. I didn't knock. I didn't ask permission. I had earned my entrance long ago through sacrifice and shadow. Mom was on the couch, folding laundry with jerky, distracted motions, as if her hands couldn't sit still now that I wasn't there to steady the world. Dad sat in his recliner, drink in hand, watching a muted sports channel, the screen flickering in reflection across his tired face. Liam was there too, leaning against the kitchen counter like he was posing for forgiveness. His eyes locked on mine as I stepped inside, and I saw it, the relief, the nervousness, the unspoken plea. But I didn't give them anything. Not a smile. Not a nod. Not a single inch of warmth. I closed the door behind me, set my bag down, and stood in the center of the room like a storm-wearing skin. I'm not here to talk it out, I said, voice calm and smooth, forged in fire. I'm not here to make this comfortable. I'm here to make it clear. They didn't interrupt. Not at first. Mom's hands froze mid-fold. Dad muted the television. Liam straightened, lips parting with a breath he didn't release. I gave you 30 years, I said, pacing once, slow and deliberate, like circling a truth they couldn't avoid. 30 years of compliance, of competence, of pretending it didn't kill me every time you forgot me and celebrated him. Liam looked away. Good. Let him. Do you remember my school play? I was 10. I made a tree costume out of cardboard and hot glue because you said we didn't have the money. I practiced every night. The night of the performance, you left me home to pick up Liam from school after he threw a tantrum and broke a desk. Mom gasped. I didn't even. Don't. I cut across her like a blade. You forgot. You forgot the play. You forgot me. That night, I ate spaghetti alone in a glitter-covered shirt and cried until I made myself sick. No one said anything. I didn't pause. When I got my full scholarship, you didn't say congratulations. You were too busy trying to get Liam reinstated after he punched a kid. That was the week you grounded me, not him, because you said you should have kept an eye on him. I was 17. He was a juvenile delinquent with a God complex. And I was the one cleaning it up. Mom had tears in her eyes now. Good. Let her cry. That graduation night? I continued, my voice rising only slightly, not from rage but from uncontainable precision. I walked that stage alone. You clapped once. You forgot to bring flowers. You didn't take a photo. Liam said the ceremony was boring, and we all went home in silence. Dad shifted in his seat. We didn't know. No. You didn't care to know. That's different. I was easy. I was silent. I was fine, so you didn't have to care. I was the background character in my own life because you needed someone to keep the lights on while Liam burned down every room he entered. I turned to face Liam directly now. You got parties for internships. You got dinners for community college. You got family speeches when you got a job at a gas station. I got a promotion to senior director and a text message saying you were throwing him a party. Not even a phone call. Not a toast. Just silence. Again. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then finally said, "You could have said something." The room went still. I walked toward him, not fast, not aggressive, just purposeful, grounded in the moment I had waited my whole life to deliver. I did, I said, voice like stone. I said it every time I stayed quiet. Every time I showed up. Every time I picked up the pieces of your chaos while no one asked how many of my own were broken. He tried again. But I didn't ask you to. No, I said, sharp as winter air. You didn't have to. Because you knew I would. Because you expected it. Because the whole family ran on the assumption that Brianna would be fine, Brianna would handle it, Brianna doesn't need anything. Mom choked out, "That's not true." I looked at her. I wrote a list. Every birthday I planned for Liam. Every holiday meal I cooked because you were too tired. Every time I stayed up until 3 a.m. to tutor him through classes he skipped. Every time I gave up a dream, a day off, a goddamn breath for the sake of keeping this house from cracking. And it still cracked. Dad looked away. We just thought you didn't need. You never thought, I snapped. You assumed. You praised me for being strong so you didn't have to worry about me. You called me the rock so you could lean all your weight on me until I shattered. I looked around the room. At the house I used to know. At the people I once believed were my shelter. And I told them the truth. I'm done. I'm not coming back. This isn't a phase. This isn't a tantrum. This isn't a negotiation. I'm done. Mom began to sob. Real sobs, guttural, loud, messy. Dad stared at his drink like it might answer for him. Liam leaned on the counter, blinking hard, jaw tight, but saying nothing. They were finally silent. But this time it wasn't control. It was consequence. And in that silence, I spoke the final words I ever would to them. I gave everything I had to this family. And now I'm giving the rest to myself. I walked out of the house without looking back. No one followed. No one called my name. Because they knew, finally, that they had lost me. And I knew, finally, that I was free. You want to know what accountability sounds like? It's not just apology. It's not just tears. It's not a plea for "can we talk," or "let's move on." Accountability is standing in the ashes of your choices while the person you failed looks you in the eye and says, "I survived you." And then walks away. Healing doesn't look like what people think it does. It doesn't come wrapped in inspirational quotes or scented candles. It doesn't arrive as an epiphany, soft and sudden, tied up in gentle light. Healing is jagged. Healing is slow. Healing is work. And sometimes, healing looks like standing in a new city with no history tethering you to the sidewalks, and realizing, for the first time in your life, that nobody here expects you to be the one holding everything together. That's what freedom felt like to me. Not a celebration. Not a revolution. Just space. Finally. Enough space to become someone who wasn't built out of obligation and silence. I moved 3 months after I walked out of that house for the last time. Packed everything I owned into a rented van, left a 2-line note with my landlord, and drove across state lines until the sky changed color and the license plates stopped looking familiar. There was no plan beyond go forward. I didn't need a map. I needed motion. The new city wasn't remarkable. No glittering skyline, no cinematic streets. Just wide sidewalks, good coffee, and a skyline that didn't feel like it had watched me be invisible for decades. That was enough. My new apartment had peeling paint, thin walls, and a neighbor upstairs who played jazz piano until 3 in the morning, but it was mine. Every inch of it. Mine without history. Mine without expectation. And for the first time, my silence wasn't a form of protest. It was peace. I didn't tell my family where I went. They didn't ask. And that silence, the one they had always mistaken for permission, became my sanctuary. I framed it. Wore it like armor. Carved it into the boundaries of my new life. I got a new therapist. Someone who didn't try to fix me, didn't speak in platitudes, didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like a story still being written, and for once, I didn't feel like the tragic supporting character. I was the glue, I told her, in our second session. The one who held it all together so no one else had to. She tilted her head, eyebrows soft but steady. And who held you? I smiled, not bitter. Not broken. No one, I said. But I'm learning how to hold myself now. Work thrived. Promotion followed promotion. My reputation grew, not as someone who took on everything, but as someone who chose what mattered. I stopped staying late unless I wanted to. I mentored younger women, not to show them how to grind themselves down, but how to protect their worth before others tried to take it. I told them the truth. You are not selfish for needing space. You are not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You are not a bad daughter, sister, friend, or employee for saying, "This hurts. This stops here." They listened. And they grew. And in teaching them, I grew, too. When my birthday came around, my 30th, no less, I did something I had never done before. I threw myself a party. No one else planned it. No one guilted me into hosting it. No one suggested a theme and then forgot to RSVP. I picked the venue. I sent the invites. I chose the wine and the music and the way I wanted to be seen. And they came. My new friends. My colleagues. The woman from the bookstore who always saved the poetry volumes I liked. My neighbor from 3B, who brought homemade pie and left wearing glitter from a shared dance floor. There were no speeches. No tears. Just laughter. Just light. Just me, surrounded by people who didn't need me to be perfect or useful or emotionally bulletproof. They liked me because I was Brianna. Not the shadow. Not the glue. Not the fixer. Just me. Sometime after midnight, I went back to my apartment, barefoot and a little tipsy, heels dangling from one hand. The air was warm. The sky wide open. I felt full. Not busy. Not anxious. Just full. On the floor beside my front door was a small envelope. No return address. Familiar handwriting. It was from my father. I almost didn't open it. But I did. Inside was a simple card. No Hallmark poetry. No long confessions. Just 7 words, written in his uneven scrawl. We see you now. Thank you. Dad. I stared at the words. Turned them over in my head. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just an acknowledgement. Late. Small. Uneven. But real. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. But I didn't throw it away either. I put it in a drawer. Because not everything has to be forgiven to be remembered. 2 weeks later, a message came from Liam. Just a single line. I get it. I really do. That was all. There were no attachments. No deflections. No defense. Just the softest echo of an understanding that had taken 30 years to form. I read it twice. Then I closed the message. And I did not reply. Because not all stories need to be reopened once they've been closed cleanly. Because sometimes growth looks like reading the words, letting them land, and walking forward anyway. I spent that weekend decorating my apartment. Nothing fancy. Just candles. A few plants. Some art that made me laugh. And for the first time in 10 years, I pulled out my framed promotion certificate, the one I had never hung because part of me thought it wasn't real if no one at home saw it. I hung it in my hallway, just above eye level. Not for validation. Not for them. For me. Because it was real. Because I had earned it. Because no one else needed to clap for it to matter. I looked around that small apartment, barefoot and steady, surrounded by pieces of a life I had chosen, not inherited, not been assigned, not been guilt into maintaining. And I saw a future. Not the one I had been pushed toward. The one I had built, brick by bleeding brick, when I finally stepped out of the shadows and said no more. That night, we gathered again, my chosen people, my real family, the ones who never once asked me to be smaller to keep them comfortable. There was wine. There was music. There was joy not bought with exhaustion. There was space for all of us to be whole. And somewhere between the laughter and the clinking of glasses, someone toasted me. To the woman who holds it down with grace and strength, my friend Alina said, glass raised high. I smiled, held my own glass aloft, and shook my head. No, I said, firm and true. Not anymore. The room quieted just enough. And I raised my glass again, this time to the girl who had held everything together for far too long. To the girl who had learned how to finally let go. To the girl who had survived neglect, silence, and invisibility, and turned it into power, clarity, and voice. And I spoke the only toast that ever truly mattered. To the girl who finally chose herself.